Good morning, everyone. It's great to join you from half the way across the globe. I hope you all had a good day at the conference yesterday. Well, today I'm going to speak to you as a researcher from a developing world who has spent years studying science, energy policy, and how it impacts the poverty levels. I want to speak to you plainly. You've been told that you live in a time of climate apocalypse, a crisis that humanity has never faced before. You are told that your very breath, your use of electricity, and your family's car, and even the food that you eat are destroying the planet. You are told that the only moral response is to dismantle the very energy systems that exist today, the same systems that pulled millions, if not billions, out of poverty over the course of the past century. So, my message today is that there is no climate apocalypse. There's a crisis, yes, but that's a crisis of truth, politics, and compassion. And more often, the victims are the world's most poorest. So, the best way I can convey this message across to you is by focusing on three critical issues. One, on the science of climate itself. What is the truth? What does the data say? And secondly, how some of these unscientific conclusions about the climate around us is being used to devise restrictive energy policies, not just in the third world, but also in the very cities and states and the countries that you live in. And finally, I just want to share some of my experiences dealing with these kind of energy policies and what can be done. So please bear with me, and I'm going to use a presentation where I'll take you through some interesting and maybe some new information that you've not heard before. I want to first take you through the history of the environmental movement. The picture that you see right now is the very first Earth Day in the year 1970. And of course, the environmental movement picked up pace and began to morph into different forms as we moved into the 21st century. And if you have ever heard about it, there was indeed a global cooling scare. Scientists all over the world were saying that the world is going to end because of an imminent ice age destroying all our plants. This was indeed very serious. And of course, like many other environmental issues, it did not materialize. And of course, there was the ozone hole crisis as well. Person like me, a millennial growing up in the 1990s, it was a big scare indeed. And just like any other environmental scare, it turned out to be a nothing burger. You can see that the ozone hole is closing up according to the newest research, and it's in the smallest size in the past 30 years, whatever they could measure, it is in its smallest size ever. And the issue of population scare is somewhat different. Though this was proven wrong, it continues to haunt us through materials in schools and universities where they claim about an impending resource crunch happening because of a population scare. And of course, they equate humans to rats, call us the evil cancer of the world, and all because we are continuing to deplete the resources in the world. And just like all those previous environmental scare, this was proven false as well, especially as we moved into the 1990s and into the 20th century. It became all clear that the increase in population did not matter, and all the scientific innovations, our ability to grow more food, etc., like helped us keep everything in check and in fact become better than we were ever before. So that takes us into the most latest scare, which began in the early 2000s, which is the global warming scare, or I should say climate change, which is the more trendy word for the crisis that they are proposing to us. I want to take you through some of the data points on climate change. The big questions we are trying to address here is how true are those claims and what does the real data say? Of course, the image that you see here is from Tuvalu Islands, where climate crisis propagandists usually do such drama where they stand inside the seawater and give a speech about Pacific Islands submerging under the increasing sea level and just helping your brain believe that we are indeed in a crisis that is destroying islands. But let us look at the data and see what is really happening. So this is the key summary before I present you the data, which I want you to see and understand before you see the data. Is there a climate crisis currently? The answer is no. Is there a future crisis in climate? The answer is again no. Is there an epidemic of fear mongering? The answer is a resounding yes, and I'll show you why. First, let's look at the tornado frequencies in United States, and we are focusing on the EF3 and the EF5 tornadoes because they are the strongest. And of course, the data from NOAA says that there is no increase in frequency of major tornadoes. And this data spans from 1954 all the way in until recently, like 2023. And just like tornadoes, the hurricanes as well show us that there has been no increase in the frequency of landfalls. So, of course, there are hurricanes forming and happening elsewhere in the ocean, impacting the Caribbean islands. But when it comes to the US mainland, like the frequency of landfall from the year 1851 all the way to 2023. So we are talking about 150 years and more. And the entire data shows us that there has, in fact, been a slight decrease in the frequency. I wouldn't read too much into the decrease, but the big point here is that there is no increase in the frequency of hurricane landfall. The same with heat waves. If you want to look up the history books or go on the internet or use your AI and search, which was the biggest heat wave event in the US, it will definitely show you the 1930 to 1940 period. And that is proven by the data from United States Environmental Protection Agency, which I will refer from here on as EPA. So the bottom line is that there is no major heat waves in the present period, and the biggest ones happened between the year 1930 and 1940. And this is an interesting graph because here they have compared heat wave frequency or heat wave numbers or alongside the increasing atmospheric carbon dioxide level. Now, of course, this is the first time I'm mentioning carbon dioxide. So the main theory is that human emission of carbon dioxide, predominantly from our energy sources, is said to be the main cause for the increase in global temperatures, according to those who promote the climate crisis. But of course, if anyone claims that, they have to back it up with data. However, as you can see from the earlier data, in which there was no CO2 comparison, but still over a long time period with hurricane, you could see more than 150 years. And again, here with the heat wave index, you can see it starts with the year 1890 and all the way up to 2020. And all you can see is that there has been an amazing increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide. But sadly, to the disappointment of climate crisis proponents, it fails to correlate with the trend in heat waves or with the trend of hurricanes or with the trend of tornadoes. And the same with droughts and excess water. So this is a key factor, and this particular graph that you see here is from the Corn Belt in the US, which comprises of like 6 to 8 states roughly. That's where the agricultural production in US is at its highest, especially corn. And you can see that the most severe drought in those areas happened between the year 1925 and 1960, or let's say 1965. And those were the most intense droughts that happened. And it correlates with the 1930 heat wave. And together, that is known as the Dust Bowl period in the Midwest, where all the crops failed and there was severe drought. But as you can see, there has been an increase in the availability of moisture in the soil, which correlates with the increase in rainfall as well. And this particular terminology, Palmer Drought Severity Index, is also known as PDSI, is a measurement, as a scientifically accurate measurement of the existence of drought or excess water, not just in US, anywhere in the world. And if I were to look at my own country, which has 1.4 billion people, and water is important, and it's a tropical country, I'm talking about India. And again, here, there is no impact of climate change on the actual rainfall in the country. And just like in the US, in India as well, the most severest droughts or the years with the least rainfall occurred in 1870s, early 1900s, 1920s. And of course, there were years in the recent past, like 1970s and early 2000s, where you had droughts. But then you can see from the graph that the most intense drought happened before 1880. And this is one of the oldest existing rainfall measurement data from India, maintained by the official federal government funded Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology in the city of Pune, which is in the west of India. So these are not some random data, but actual data. And it's pretty evident for anyone with at least a basic understanding of observing data, and especially a simple data set that is in front of you, where you can see the blues being rainfall and the reds being drought or a lack of rainfall in the negative. And it's pretty evident there is a snow crisis. And of course, I was one of the authors for a special state report on the state of Arkansas, and I did this in 2025 last year. And to our surprise, we found out the the temperatures in Arkansas have been on a decreasing trend. And of course, here in the graph, you can see the comparison between the temperature, which is in the red, and atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration curve, which is in the blue or dark blue violetish color. So you can see the comparison, and you can see that uh, there is, of course, no correlating trend. My point here is not to prove that there is no correlation, but to prove that during the same years when the atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations increased, the temperatures in Arkansas decreased. Of course, this is a regional data, a very minute perspective, but it still matters. So when a lawmaker in Arkansas proposes a policy on reducing carbon dioxide, saying that it is impacting his citizens and his constituency people, then one has to put up his hand and show the data, say that the claims do not match what the data speak about. And this is why I love this quote from one of the most respected scientists, Stephen Koonin. So he served under the Obama administration as well. So this is not some right-wing person coming and saying that there is no climate crisis, but an authentic, well-respected scientist who has been studying climate science and its impacts. And here is his quote. He says, when the reports explicitly state that it's challenging to identify trends in most extreme weather events, let alone attribute them to human influences, the media and politicians, or I should say politicians, tend to avoid discussing this. And that is exactly what is happening. When you have the data, and if it's very inconvenient and does not match the fear mongering that they are going on about, they just ignore it, try to subdue it, and refuse to show it to the public, and try to come up with ways of cherry picking where they could inflate certain extreme weather event without a comprehensive picture to make people believe there is indeed a climate crisis. I want us to first focus on life expectancy. This is the number of years an average person born in a certain year would live. And as you can see in the 1770, the global life expectancy average was just below 30 years. But thanks to the scientific discovery, innovations, and various other factors, the global life expectancy today stands above 70 years. And this is as in stark contrast to the picture that the climate crisis propagandists paint for you. And if you look at the years, especially between 1950 and 2023, you can see a huge increase in life expectancy. And this goes against the crisis narrative that you've been hearing. And of course, it matches with the number of deaths from natural disasters. Here, this issue is specifically interesting because natural disasters are often tied to climate crisis, and they say that there are more supercharged extreme weather events that are killing people, destroying their livelihood, and so and so. But the actual number of deaths from natural disasters is indeed decreasing. And the graph here shows you a decadal average, and you can see the past 4 decades have been the lowest. Again, goes against the narrative that they try to sell you. And the most important aspect is the number of deaths from cold weather and summer heat. And you can see that the deaths from cold weather is many times higher than the deaths from moderate and extreme heat. And this is true even in India, where I live, where summer temperatures can become very high. And you have 1.4 billion people, majority of whom who do not have adaptive systems to cool them down during the summer heat, like their counterparts in, let's say, southern Europe and southern US. So that's remarkable. And this is true across the globe, as you can see from this graph, like be it Australia, Canada, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Thailand, everywhere, moderate and extreme cold kill more people than moderate and extreme heat. And this is attested by scientific journals and surveys year after year. But what they do not tell you is that more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere helps our plants. This is where we go to basic biology that we studied in our schools. where we clearly understand that carbon dioxide is plant food. And this fact is attested by thousands of peer-reviewed journals, by NASA, and literally by everyone. There is no one contesting this fact that plants loves carbon dioxide. And here you can see the change in leaf area or foliage cover across the globe, indicative of plant growth between the year 1982 to 2015. And this specifically was possible because of the increased carbon dioxide. There are plenty of scientific papers which single out carbon dioxide as the primary driver of increase in the greening of Earth. And even NASA has acknowledged this in some of their reports that it is the carbon dioxide that led to the greening of the forests across the globe. And of course, that is because the plants have plenty of water. And as I showed you in a previous graph, that droughts are not that severe, and the plants have much more water to work with. And of course, that reflects in the yield as well. Not only that, it is now understood that plants have more time available for them to grow. And by that, I mean ideal temperature and the amount of sunlight that they have. It has increased since the year 1895. So that is a positive factor for plant growth, for food crop growth in the US. And this specific graph is for the Midwest. This is true not just in the US, but globally as well. Both India and China, which constitute together around 3 billion people, are seeing and regularly proving that there has been an increase in the major crops that they are growing, be it rice, be it wheat, be it corn, and so many other food crops. They're all showing an increase in food crop growth. Now imagine how many people around you, or how many people in your friend circle, or in your family, or in your office, or in your college know about this. All they have to do is just go on a AI platform and ask about the increase in yield, plant yield, and they can pick up any major food crop, and they'll see a huge increase in the food crop yield across the globe. And of course, there are many factors which contributed to this, including the use of fertilizers, which again is highly dependent on fossil fuels like coal and gas. By gas, I mean natural gas. So this is a very well proven fact that there is no crisis in our food production systems or in our natural ecosystem, and climate change has not impacted our ability to grow food or the nature's ability to becoming green and staying healthy, I would say. And this is also reflected in the global burnt area. If you look at the number of claims surrounding wildfires, and you see red images of burning forests and burning houses in some of the most famous networks such as CNN, LA Times, New York Times, and if you come across the Atlantic on BBC News and Guardian, all talking about the burning forests because of climate change. But this graph is a global historical reconstruction of burned area per year, and this is global. And you can see very clearly when compared to the year 1900, there has been a decrease, a gradual decrease in the percentage of global land that has burned. Now, why did I harp so much about all these climate facts? There's a reason, because these climate facts, if they are used correctly, will not lead to energy policies that are being currently forced upon us by the global elites. And to put it in a different way, they use climate crisis as a justification to tell us to not use fossil fuels. Of course, it is very hard to imagine the impact of this if you are to live in a very developed country where the impact of increase in fuel prices is not as bad as it would be in a developing part of the world. And by that, I mean countries in Africa, countries in South America, and a few places in Southeast Asia. And for a lot of people, millions of people in China and India who are well below the middle income category. So if you look at the energy disparity in our world, a kettle boiled twice a day by a family in Britain, that is UK, uses 5 times as much electricity as a person in Mali, a country in Africa, uses in an entire year. Likewise, if you look at Tanzania, it takes 8 years for a person there to consume as much electricity as an American citizen in the US consumes in a month. Likewise, a freezer in your refrigerator consumes 10 times more electricity than a person from Liberia uses in an entire year. So that is a snapshot of the energy disparity. But of course, this is just talking about a comparison. But if you look at their daily life, what it means for their opportunities of employment, the state of manufacturing, the state of economy there, it all boils down to energy disparity. And I want to specifically focus on Africa because if you come to know about the situation of people there, you would understand what it means for these restrictive climate driven energy policies do in those countries. Africa alone, there are 431 million people living in extreme poverty. You could say that's almost like the number of people who live in US. So like an entire population of US living in extreme poverty, which is like they live on less than $2 per day. But the unfortunate forecast is that this number is going to be almost the same as we move into the future. In fact, there are some studies which I've not included in this graph, which show that there will be a net increase in the number of people who will be in extreme poverty in Africa as we move into the year 2035. And that is not a good news. And energy has to do a lot with this, which I'll come back in the later stage of this speech. And if you look at the energy use per person, you can again see from this graph, the lighter parts on the map are the places where there is the least energy use per person, which also then translates into the quality of life that they live. And you can see all the darker places are places where you have good energy use. But in many parts of India and Southeast Asia and Africa, the energy use is very less. And if you look at electricity access, it's the same thing. This map is in contrast to the past one in terms of color coding. You can see the darker ones are the least electrified places, and you can see Africa is the place where people suffer from the lack of electricity. And when you talk about electricity, you're talking about storage for vaccines. You're talking about ability to start a small manufacturing unit, your ability to have electronic equipments and access to content that can change your thinking and help you become a better person. You can go on and on. And this is the fact. Fewer than 1 in 4 people have access to electricity in the parts of sub-Saharan Africa. And sub-Saharan Africa is the central region of Africa. that you see. It includes Democratic Republic of Congo, also called as DRC. You have South Sudan and countries like that. If you look at the global share of population with access to clean cooking fuels, you again see that Africa is the country with uh, less access to natural gas, which they use as LPG, which is a cooking terminology to indicate cooking gas. And by here, we mean actual gas, not gasoline, the fuel that you get in the pumps over there in the US. And I want to mention a note here. If you see at India and China, they are darker in color, and also a few parts in Southeast Asia. And that's because these countries had decades-long program to help people get access to cooking gas. And that in turn has resulted in a decrease in deaths occurring due to inhalation of harmful substance that happens when you cook your food or you heat something using wood, charcoal, and they even use cow dung for the heating purposes. So again, Africa is in a very disadvantageous position. Takeaway from those graphs is for you to understand that all those countries started on the same footing, but some countries that had access to fossil fuels and who continue to have access to reliable and cheap fossil fuels were able to become more prosperous than others. And this is evident from the fossil fuel consumptions since the year 1900 and all the way till present day. It is very evident that fossil fuel has enabled us to become better in how we use the things that are available to us and increase the life expectancy all across the globe. And I would say it's not rocket science, the fact that fossil fuels were one of the key reasons. And this you can see by the present day graph of countries, their per capita income and the use of electricity there. And you can clearly see there is no such thing as a low energy rich country. I mean, there's no country which consumes very less energy per capita and somehow managed to become rich. That has never happened. Energy is quintessential in every part of our lives, from heating our homes to staying cool to running our industries, for us to move across the country. Fossil fuels are there everywhere. And if no one had told you, more than 90% of everyday things that you use in your house or even that you see around you where you're sitting now are made using the help of fossil fuels and their derivatives, the petrochemicals. So if you want to look at it in a way, it was the climate lies that were used to enforce energy policies upon the third world and also the first world. And that eventually resulted in people becoming more poor, or for those who are already in poverty, making it difficult for them to escape their situation of living in poverty. And I want to refocus our attention on Africa and specifically Democratic Republic of Congo. This is a very good case study. You can see that 63% of people there live in extreme poverty, not just poverty, extreme poverty. And only 23% of the population have access to electricity. So there's just 1 in 4 person having grid electricity. That's something very remarkable. And of course, one of the biggest threats to the livelihood of people there is cooking with harmful substances like cow dung and wood and charcoal, which results in death by pollution. These people to escape death by cooking, of course, you need to supply them with gas for cooking. But the question is, the global elites and the anti-fossil crusaders do not allow that to happen. So my question to them is death by cooking with charcoal is not evil? Like gas is evil, fossil fuels are evil, but someone dying because they use charcoal instead of gas is not evil. That's the that's the narrative and the storyline that they want to put across to you. And of course, there is the hypocrisy. While claiming that these poor people in Congo should not be using fossil fuels, they themselves fly on expensive private jets, releasing tons of carbon dioxide, not once in a while, but every year for the climate conferences. And their hypocrisy is very rank. Like, and it's you can call it even evil. Besides, they also involved in climate misinformation, in spreading climate misinformation. And the media, the mainstream media plays a bigger role in that. And imagine this, someone telling you that Al Gore has given a speech on climate change and why we should use renewable energy instead of fossil fuels. And technically, he is projected as an objective as expert on matters of energy and energy physics, and not a worker on the field who understands the system and who understands which systems can hold and provide us reliable electricity throughout the year. And that is how they've been fooling the people. A big role in this was played by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. If that word is too big for any of you who are hearing, it's nothing but the climate division of the United Nations. So United Nations is a huge global organization comprising of unelected leaders and representatives from each country who decide policies on climate, which is then compiled into a book. And then that book is sent to the leaders of all the countries who are part of United Nations to follow and implement. And this is where they have managed to promote climate lies and justify extreme energy policies, restrictive energy policies based on those climate lies. And that is the exact route through which all these policies and lies infiltrated into our everyday media and everyday lives. And of course, you meet anyone whom you see today, they blame everything on climate change. They even blame the consumption of sugary sodas in US on climate change. And of course, you might have come across more crazier things that they blame all on climate change. Of course, we have a bit of light at the end of the tunnel, I should say. Bill Gates, for example, last year claimed that climate crisis would not cause humanity's demise, which is an extreme U-turn from his regular position of promoting climate alarmism. Bill Gates is still a big proponent of renewable energy, which is another issue that I want to focus today because there has been a lot going on replacing the current energy systems with renewable energy. My position is that renewable energy is good, but it cannot replace fossil fuels. At least the form of renewable energy that we have today, there is no chance that they could replace fossil fuels. There are a number of reasons why. One, wind and solar energy is highly intermittent. You get energy from solar systems only when the sun is shining, and you get energy from wind when the wind is blowing. So they are highly intermittent, and that means they are highly unreliable. And when that happens, you have to make up for it. You need to have backup systems like gas and coal powered plants that have to keep running 24 hours to fall back and support whenever these systems do not produce electricity. And that's why they are highly unreliable. And of course, they increase the cost of power that the end consumer pays. And I'll show you how. Not only that, they are susceptible to weather. So you have a dust storm, and it can cover the solar panels. Same with snow, which can cover the solar panels. And the same thing with wind. There have been a lot of documented cases in the US where wind and solar failed during extreme weather events. And of course, there is a slight impact on grid electricity from conventional and traditional sources as well. But then the impact is less compared to wind and solar. And of course, no one talks about this fact, but wind and solar do destroy the natural ecosystems and habitats, which are otherwise used by wild animals and various other plants. And I will come back to that again. So unless an extraordinary scientific breakthrough happens and we have mind-blowing technologies at our hand for use, there is no way that wind, solar, hydrogen, or other forms of energy can replace conventional energy, and that includes nuclear. So nuclear is still a very good form of energy if handled carefully. It is one of the best systems that is available to produce high amount of electricity, that is power, without needing much space, which is completely opposite to wind and solar. They require a large space to manufacture or produce electricity that is very less. And when talking about the cost involved with renewable energy, you can very well see that with Australia and the UK, where an increase in renewable energy percentage in their main grid has led to an increase in electricity prices. And in the UK, we are talking about both the power prices for residential homes and also the industries. And that is why the UK industry has become less competitive compared to the rest of the world, and a lot of industrialists there are either moving out or blaming the government, and the same is true with Australia. And this is because solar and wind are expensive, and just like the graph that I showed you before, there is no cheap green electricity. So whichever country has a high proportion or percentage of wind and solar always sees an increase in the prices of electricity. This is true across the globe. And we could see even in Germany, which is hailed as one of the leaders in green energy globally. And you can see those numbers there with the amount of electricity produced from solar and wind in Germany. But Germany is currently struggling, just like Australia and UK. And Germany's chancellor admitted in this year, in April of 2026, that Germany has made a huge strategic mistake of not increasing their solar energy and phasing out solar energy. But he failed to mention that this is precisely because of the green ideology, that they believed the huge amounts of electricity from solar and wind is sufficient. They were, I would say, misled in believing solar and wind. And this phenomena is not restricted to Germany, it's happening all across the globe. I want to harp back on the issue of solar and wind destroying habitats. And I have some experience with that. And this is my research station in Portugal, where I served as a field ecologist studying on birds, especially the great bustard on the bottom there, and the kestrel. It's a kind of raptor. You can see it on the image above. And these are the two birds that I worked with. And of course, one of my main research there was on how electricity lines, power lines, and transformers and windmills impact the movement of birds, including large raptors. And I could honestly tell you that ornithologists, that is the people who study of birds and everything to do with that, clearly say that wind and solar are encroaching on bird habitats and they kill more raptors. By raptors, we mean eagles, vultures, and so on, so than any other cause currently. And a comprehensive study that came out recently in the year 2025 showed that wind and solar farms overlap with the distribution range of 35% of all world's threatened vertebrate species. That's a large number. And when you're talking about wind and solar saving us from climate crisis, no one talks about wind and solar killing threatened species of importance all across the globe. Some people have lame excuses like the buildings in Chicago and house cats killing more birds. But let me tell you, no house cat leaps into the air and kills a bald eagle. It simply does not. We are here talking about species of critical importance, species which are of high conservation importance across the globe, which are being threatened by wind and solar. This issue nobody talks about. And of course, we have so many other factors that kills birds, but let's be honest, these are not green in any way. They kill birds. And that's why I call them blood red. Wind and solar are blood red and they are not green. There was even a study recently from the Indian state of Rajasthan, which is located in North India, where we have the Indian bustard, a variant of the great bustard with which I worked in Portugal. So even in Rajasthan, the solar panel farms have destroyed the habitat of the Indian bustards and the windmills as well, which is documented by various non-profits and ornithologists who are working there. So when you look at it all, it is very evident that the CO2 climate change debates and disagreements are not just ideological warfares. For billions in developing parts of the world, and for those in the lower income category, even in the developed parts of the world, the presence or absence of affordable and reliable energy sources makes the difference between life and death. And when you look at the available signs on climate change and the links between how they are used to justify restrictive energy policies, it becomes very clear that we cannot just remain silent. We have to voice our concern, and there are a number of ways you can do that. I think the most easiest one is contacting your local representative, the politicians who represent your region in national level and at international levels. Let them know the actual signs of climate change and what you stand for. And one of the starting steps or one of the prerequisite to do that is for you to engage and spend time in analyzing the data and finding the right sources, such as organizations such as Heartland, the CO2 Coalition, the Cornwall Alliance for the Stewardship of Creation. These are some of the organizations that are currently involved in disseminating data and information about the actual science behind climate change from a neutral perspective, from a realist perspective, where it is not dominated by government funding or propaganda from international political organizations like the United Nations. So you have to spend a lot of time on them, analyze the data for yourself, see the reality around you, and even observe non-climate data information such as the success of agricultural systems around you, the increase in human life expectancy, the improvement in medical care, the improvement in our adaptive capacity to extreme weather, and all these factors which together inform each one of our minds whether we are living in a crisis or not. And that is very important. And using that, you can then voice your opinion and also share your concerns of what these harmful policies justified through scientifically inaccurate climate informations are doing to the lives of people around the world. So that would what I want to encourage you, and that I think brings me to the close of my presentation. Thank you for your time, and I hope you were able to take one or two important key information from this presentation. Thanks again.